Well, we've come inside and hardtack is what we'll talk about first. Why hardtack? Well, if we talk about getting a connection to the Civil War experience, over 1.5 million men served in the Union Army and they all got this at some point in time. Here's a finished piece of hardtack, and we're preparing to do a larger video in Civil War Digital Digest real soon about how to make hardtack with best practices using a lot of notes out of history, including looking at the manufacturing process. When we do that, we're going to use larger tools, and we're going to use some specialty pieces like hardtack cutters, which are essentially cookie cutters, but they're for making this. Today, my goal is to help you gain a quick experience and a quick connection to the Civil War. This felt like a little bit much. Let's do it by hand like I've done it for years. Okay, what do we have sitting in front of me? Well, for starters, I have 3 cups of all-purpose flour and 1 cup of whole wheat pastry flour. I also have a cup and a half of water. If you've looked at hardtack before, many people talk about using salt. As we research more, we find the instructions to say, if you use salt, put it in the water. That's tending to lead many of us to go ahead and use less salt. The water is lukewarm. Let's get to it. For starters, the flour back then was all one flour. We're looking to get the best consistency to look most like hardtack. Collector Kyle Stetz has provided pictures of a piece and a half of original hardtack that he has from Norman Gifford of the 10th New York Cavalry. To make those look the same, we're going to take the 2, dump them in. They were all the same thing back during the war, so I'm just going to quick stir it up to make sure the flour sort of acts as one. And now we're going to start slowly working the water in. If you bake, this is not going to be like many things you bake. If you've done beaten biscuits, it'll be more like that. This is going to go ahead and be a much firmer dough than you're used to, so don't be surprised if it doesn't come up like a cake that you're used to making. I'm going to start stirring it in, and we're just going to work on this. Okay, well, the hardtack's coming together. Now's the time to get it together, and now's where we're going to put a little more elbow grease rather than some of the bigger tools. I'm going to pull this out, and I'm just going to start to knead the hardtack. This is a process that I'm going to take 6 or 7 minutes and just do it and do it and do it and do it. So watch a little bit, and then we'll talk a little more. In order to do that, I'm going to first lightly flour my working surface. So, okay, this looks a little more dry than you're used to seeing, and this early kneading is just a part of getting the rest of the flour worked in the water so we get just one tough, really dry dough. Okay, so I've kneaded the hardtack for about 7 or 8 minutes, and if you take a look at it, we don't have a heavy sheen because we use so little water. It's a very dry, very tough dough. We're still going to set this dough out to rest for about a half an hour and take a quick break here. It allows us one other great thing if you're looking to make this, and that is the more I study baking, the more the discussions come up again and again about making sure your oven is well preheated, and we're gonna do one more thing. So the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna set our oven to 450 now while we set this to rest for a half an hour to bring the oven up to temperature. Before I start my oven, I'm gonna take a oven-proof bowl, fill it about half up with water, and then put that in. We want to bake with steam. This is something we're finding out of research is part of making hardtack and makes your hardtack a little more flat like the original. So we'll set the oven to 450. We'll take a couple of minutes. We'll come back and we'll lay the hardtack out in just a little bit. Okay, we're back. We've let the hardtack dough rest for a half an hour, and we've used that time for the oven to preheat with the water in it, so we're building steam to bake with steam. Time to roll it out and actually make the hardtack. Notice after it sits, it's just a little bit tacky on the bottom. Go ahead, just a little more flour. Time to work with the rolling pin. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna just roll the dough out flat. And when I roll the dough out, I'm rolling in both directions. I want to build as close to a square or a rectangle as I can. Okay, when you look at the original piece of hardtack we have access to, you see there's almost like layers in it. Here's one way to make it. We're going to fold the dough. I'm just going to take it from my left, come in a third, from my right, come in a third, then from close to me, fold up a third, and finally from away from me, fold back a third. Now that I've got this basic rectangle, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to roll the dough out again, and we'll cut the hardtack from here. So what we want to do is try and roll the dough till it's about 1/4 of an inch thick. Now we're just going to cut 3-inch squares. Straighten an edge off. Okay, so we've got most of our dough laid out. We'll roll the rest out again in a second. They're cut into 3-inch squares. Now it's time to put those telltale dots or holes that go in hardtack. Partially, this will help you with the look, but it's also important to the baking process because this helps the bread dry evenly through as it bakes. So we're just going to go ahead. I took a chopstick. You could take anything else that makes a hole. I like it's a little more round, and we're just going to poke the holes in here. And I'm simply making a 4x4 pattern like the piece of original we worked with. All right, so we've got our first crackers rolled out. We've got more to roll up, but we need to clear our working space. That's with the spatula, and we'll start with our cookie sheet, our 4. One thing I found as I'm baking, a little bit of cornmeal on the bottom of the pan helps keep it from adhering when you're baking. This is a period method. All right, so we've got the crackers ready to go in the oven. There's one last step. We're gonna take just a little bit of water and moisten the top of each of them along with the steam that's already in the oven. This is gonna help the baking process, and we think is a lot more like originally happened during the Civil War in the factory baking environment. Okay, the oven's been going at 450. These are ready to go. In they go, and we're gonna let them bake for 20 minutes. Well, we've waited the 20 minutes. The oven's going off. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the oven right away and then carefully, remember we're using steam, so this you have to be cautious with. I'm going to open the oven up and I'm going to let the steam come out of the oven. I'm going to let things cool a little bit. With a set of hot pads, I'm carefully going to go ahead and remove the water from in there so that we can continue to leave the oven as the steam and moisture leaves as a place while it cools to continue to dry the hardtack. And now we're just going to close the oven up once the moisture's had a chance to leave, and we're going to let it just go until it cools. Okay, well, two things a soldier loves, hardtack and coffee, or at least he's learned to make his peace with by the time he's been in the Army for a while. Our hardtack has cooled completely. We've got some coffee with it. Why? One, well, it's part of a connection to the Civil War, and two, it's a little bit of safety for you. Hardtack is hard. You've got teeth you need to do something else with. Be cautious when you use them. Think about checking out our episode on Hellfire Stew, or just taking hardtack, dunking it in coffee until it's ready to eat. So, well, hey, I hope you've had a great time learning how to make this. It's been fun to share it with you. Hope you found a small connection to the Civil War. like always, it's hardtack and it's something to eat. Take care.